Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Tracy, and if you don't know me, I have a passion for upcycling clothing and I teach sewing on here. Last time I gave you guys a prom dress sewing pattern was like 2 years ago, and it was the silk prom dress, which I loved and you guys loved so much, so I'm so happy to finally bring you guys the silk lace gown tutorial. Previous prom dress was very sleek and minimal, so I kind of wanted to play with cutouts and just more detail. I upcycled a Silk Burnout Velvet scarf to create this dress because when I first made the prototype of this dress was for a gala. I thrifted a Silk Burnout Velvet in Paris and the gown turned out so stunning. I wanted to recreate something similar, so I was like scrolling on Poshmark looking for the perfect burnout velvet silk scarf, and I found it. Best thing about the scarf was that it was completely beaded, so I knew it was just going to sparkle in the sunlight, and I absolutely love the beading detail. I made a digital sewing pattern for you guys of this dress, so it's available in my Etsy shop and I have linked it down below. The pattern is available in A4 letter size and A0 format. I recommend getting it printed in A0 format just because the pieces are pretty large. It's gonna be a pain to kind of tape all those pages together. To make this silk lace gown, you're going to need 3 yards of some silk chiffon and 1.5 yards of silk burnout velvet. If you are gonna upcycle a silk scarf, just make sure it's at least 45 inches wide, just so you have enough fabric for everything. I also found this one on Poshmark, but I know Mood Fabrics has a variety of burnout silk velvet. I'll link some options for you guys as well. The pattern's very versatile, so feel free to use any woven fabric of your choice. The trim accents, you need about 5 yards of 1-inch lace trim, 1 yard of 1/2-inch wide elastic. For your straps, you need a 1/4-inch elastic. I like to use the elastic with the silicone backing just so it doesn't slip on me. I always make my straps adjustable, so you need a 1/4-inch rings and slides. For the strap placement, you have the option to do the halter style, or you can bring your strap all the way to the back and just have 2 straps. You also need 1 yard of picot elastic trim for the neckline, and you need 7 yards of 1/2-inch wide accent ribbon. I hope you guys enjoyed this silk lace prom dress tutorial, so let's get into it. The first thing I needed to do with this scarf was to remove the beaded trim so I could save it and use it for another project. After removing the beaded trim, I went ahead and just cut out my pieces. I like using a rotary cutter, but sometimes with beaded fabric, it's best to use scissors so you don't like damage your blade with the bead. I went ahead and just chalked my pattern on top of the velvet, and then I cut on that line just because the velvet likes to shift around. I do recommend just cutting your pattern pieces with like paper at the bottom first, and then placing your fabric on top and then paper again. That's like the best way to cut out silk so it doesn't shift around. When you cut your cups out, don't forget to mirror image the pattern so you have a left cup and a right cup. If you're using beaded fabric like I am, it's really important to chalk your seam allowance so you know where you need to remove the beads so they don't get stuck into your machine. I like to take my needle and thread and look at the back of the fabric and just do a knot to tie off the beading thread wherever the seam allowance ends, and then I just start taking my snips and remove the beads. This is honestly like the most tedious process with beaded fabric. It's pretty annoying sometimes, but I promise the finished look looks so good and none of your beads are gonna fall off. I did the same thing to my cups because there were some beads in the way, and I always save my extra beads so I can go back in and bead if I want. Don't forget to mark your notches. On silk fabric, I specifically like to use chalk. I don't like to cut into the seam allowance. I like to finish the front neckline first before I sew my cups together. I take some picot elastic trim and I just make it a little bit longer than the front neckline just so I have a tail at the top. I take some of the decorative ribbon and I cut out the same length. Take your front cup and overlock the front neckline. If you don't have an overlock machine, I recommend using your regular sewing machine and using an overcasting stitch. After you overlock the front neckline, just place it right on top of the picot elastic trim, lining it up to the edge right before the picot finish. And just do a straight stitch with your sewing machine. Don't forget to back tack at the top and the bottom. And that's what the picot finish looks like. It gives it a really nice clean finished edge. I like to take some decorative ribbon and just stitch it right on top of that overlock stitch, giving the cup an even nicer finish. Take it to the sewing machine. You want to stitch on both sides of the ribbon as close as possible to the edge. Now for the cup seam, take your side cup and place it right on top of your front cup with right sides facing each other. You're going to just match up your notches and pin all the way down. Take it to the sewing machine and sew with a 1/2-inch seam allowance. And to clean finish my seams, I like to overlock them, but if you don't have an overlock machine, you can use a regular sewing machine with an overcasting stitch, or you can just go ahead and do French seams for this. Give your cup seam a good press and push it towards the side, and you're going to just take it to the sewing machine and just top stitch that seam allowance in place so it lays flat against the cup. After putting your cups together, it's time to finish the armhole neckline. Cut out a picot elastic that's longer than the armhole. Place it right side with the picot facing towards the cup so that when you fold it under, the picot trim will be facing out. Follow the edge of the armhole and just overlock that picot into place. After you overlock the armhole, make sure you fold your picot up and just take an iron to give it a good press. Take it over to your sewing machine and top stitch it into place. Take some decorative ribbon, make sure the piece is longer than the armhole. The decorative ribbon will overlap at the strap point very nicely, and you can just do the same thing we did to the front neckline to stitch on either side of the ribbon. Overlock the bottom of the cups. For the lace trim under the cup, take your underbust measurement. Mine was 29 inches and you need to add 5 inches to that number. So I end up cutting my lace trim to 34 inches long. And I like to add some decorative ribbon to the top of this lace trim just so it complements the front cups. Take your lace trim, find the half point, and at the center front of this trim, you need to mark the top corner and the bottom 45-degree angle. Chalk in that line, and when you sew that diagonal, your trim is going to end up in a V shape so you can have that center front point. Trim the excess seam allowance on the back and just open it up. You get a perfect V. I like to take it to the sewing machine and just top stitch that seam allowance open. Take your cup and at the front point, overlap a ½ inch. Place a pin. Take the lace underbust trim and place that center front point at the center front of the cups. Chalk the ½ inch seam allowance at the bottom of the cup so you just have a line to follow with the underbust trim. I'm just taking the underbust trim and placing it at the very edge of that chalk line. After pinning it in place, just take it to the sewing machine and stitch on the other side of that ribbon. To do the gathering effect at the back of the bodice, cut 2 pieces of elastic that are 5 inches long, and I like to take a lighter and just burn the ends so they don't end up fraying later. Start stitching the elastic at the end of the armhole and stretching it as you sew until you reach the bottom of the lace trim. And when you're starting to sew the elastic, it's best to grab the back of whatever you're sewing with elastic so you can pull, and it just makes it easier as you stretch the elastic and trying to like stitch that into place. And you can see it's going to start to do this beautiful gathering effect. After stitching the elastic into place, I like to take my iron and just give it a good press. It ends up shrinking the elastic even more and just giving you more refined gathers. For the ribbon strings at the back, I'm just cutting out 2 ribbon pieces that are about 17 inches long. And I like to cut the ends at a diagonal so they're cut on the bias and it doesn't fray. And then I go back in with the lighter to just kind of melt it into place. I take the straight end of the ribbon and place right sides together to the end of the lace. I do the same to the other side, and I just take it to the sewing machine and I sew a ½ inch and I back tack a few times. After stitching the ribbon into place, I push the seam allowance back and top stitch it just so it's nice and finished. I like to stitch a square just so the ribbon tie is more secure at this end. Now we can sew the skirt together. So you want to take your front overskirt and just overlock all around it, everything besides the hem. And for the front underskirt, I went ahead and just hemmed all the way around. So the left side, the hem, and the right side. I hemmed it with a rolled hem on my overlock machine. Then I went ahead and just gave it a good press. After you hemmed the left side, the bottom hem, and the right side, overlock the top edge of the underskirt. After overlocking the top edge of the skirt, the straight edge, which is your front skirt that overlaps, Take some decorative ribbon. I always like to cut it a little bit larger. The decorative ribbon will be stitched at the very edge, covering the overlock stitch. And do this exact step to the overskirt. Take it to your sewing machine and place the ribbon right on top of your overlock stitch. Stitch on the edge of the ribbon that is away from the edge of the fabric. You will stitch on the other side of the ribbon when we overlap both skirts and join them together. Trim the excess of the ribbon, and I like to take my lighter and just melt the end of the ribbon. And for the curved part that we overlocked, you're going to fold it underneath a 1/4 inch. Pin it in place. I like to take it to my iron. Just ironing the seam allowance down is enough to just take it to the sewing machine and start sewing without using pins. I repeat these exact steps to the underskirt. I take it to the sewing machine and just top stitch that seam allowance down. Before we attach the godet and overlap our skirts, on the pattern I indicate where the overlap placement is going to take place, so make sure you chalk that in or at least thread trace it on both the underskirt and the overskirt. Overlock the back side and the front side of the godet. Now we can attach the godet to the overskirt. Make sure you match up both front sides together first. So place your godet, match up the front sides, pin it in place. Take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Push the seam allowance towards the godet and just give it a good press. After attaching the front side of the godet to the overskirt, take the back side of the godet and attach it to the back side of the overskirt. So you're just going to place right sides together and just pin along that side. After pinning it in place, take it to the sewing machine and sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance. The underskirt does not have a godet insert, so you're just going to take the front side and the back side and join them together at that small side seam. So you're just placing right sides together and pinning that corner and just taking it to the sewing machine and sewing a 1/2 inch. It's a really small side seam. Take your underskirt and place it inside the overskirt. Now you can just match up those notches at the front overlap and just put a pin into place. Match up the back notch of the underskirt and overskirt, place a pin, and for the rest of the skirt to attach it, I'm just following the overlap placement on the underskirt and the overskirt. I take a needle and thread and just baste the overlap portion in place, just so it doesn't move around and I don't have to deal with pins when I'm taking it to the sewing machine. Repeat to the other side and follow the overlap placement. Chiffon fabric is very flimsy sometimes, so I like to just hold the skirt up. If I have a bubble or anything that doesn't seem to fit, I just hold it up and just kind of let it flatten out, and then I take a pin and just fix the placement if I need to. I take a needle and thread and baste the other side's placement. And this is what it looks like just basted, but before I go to the sewing machine and stitch the placements into place, I need to go in and just remove the beading. It's really annoying and time consuming, but I was so happy with the final product, so it was definitely worth it. I took it to the sewing machine and top stitched that placement into place. It's really important to hand baste those overlapping placements. Having pins in the way would be very annoying trying to get this through the sewing machine. I just did a regular top stitch all the way around both overlap sides. And on the front overlap pieces, this is where you stitch on the other side of the ribbon, so the ribbon lays super flat. After attaching both skirts together, I went ahead and just removed all of the basting stitching. I went back in with my needle and thread and just hand tacked the beading so it wouldn't unravel. I'm using a very sheer fabric, so in order to like fix this issue at the cup to give me more coverage, I went ahead and just cut out some lace applique and took some black beads and just started beading more on this fabric to kind of make it look seamless. And this is definitely very time consuming, but you can also just do this technique with just like lace and just applique on top, or you can cut out some lining pieces and line the cups before you sew them together. Did not have a small embroidery hoop to do the beading on the cup, but I had this like circled piece of hardware that I added double-sided tape to and just kind of stretched my cup around it while I beaded, which worked out just fine. Now we can attach the bodice to the skirt. Take the top 2 points of the skirt and line it up with the seams at the cup. So line it up, place a pin on both sides, take it to the sewing machine. After stitching that into place, I like to take pins and just pin the lace down onto the skirt. Then I take my clear presser foot and just stitch around that lace. Now for these straps, take a 1/4 inch elastic, cut out 2 pieces that are 9 inches long if you want to do the halter strap, or you can cut out 2 pieces of elastic that are 16.5 inches long if you want your strap to go all the way to the back. After I cut out my strap elastic, I take the lighter and melt the ends. At the strap point, I make sure just to leave about 1 inch of the ribbon on the top. I just take my lighter and melt it so it doesn't fray. Take one end of your elastic and just place it at the strap point. My elastic likes to curl because it has like the silicone backing in it. After placing my strap about a 1/2 inch in, I take the decorative trim and just fold it underneath, encasing the elastic. I place a pin and then I take it to the sewing machine and just do a zigzag stitch to secure that elastic into place. I repeat to the other side and then I attach my ring and slide to make the strap adjustable. If you don't know how to make adjustable straps, I've linked a tutorial down below. I had to hand sew my ring and slide into place just because my sewing machine would not sew through the silicone elastic. This is what the adjustable strap looks like. And finally, all that's left to do is to do the rolled hem finish on the dress. Feel free to do a baby hem if you don't have an overlock machine. After sewing the hem, give it a good press. On the sewing pattern, I've also included an optional flower that you can make. So you want to just go ahead and cut out your cascade, which is that spiral looking pattern piece. Then I like to just hem both sides of this cascade with a rolled hem finish. You can also just do a baby hem or an overlock depending on the kind of finish you want on your flower. I went ahead and gathered a long piece that was about 40 inches long. I'm doing a hand gather technique, so I'm just back tacking my first hand stitch and then just going up and down and creating a running stitch and pulling the thread so it just starts to gather the flower at the very edge. And make sure you're doing the running stitch along the inside of the spiral. As you gather, go in a spiral motion, and when you reach the end, you can just tack it at the center. You just need to establish what side will be the back of the flower, and you can just start tacking all those ends together. I took about 20 inches of lace trim and I attached some more decorative ribbon onto it and started creating this same effect of the flower and gathering this lace trim in a spiral motion. It gave the flower a little bit more fullness and it ended up being more cohesive with the dress. I attached some ribbon tails to it and I just used a safety pin to attach it to the dress. I wanted to have the versatility of having the flower or putting it somewhere else on the dress. And at the end, I just decided to attach it to the top of the godet insert. The silk lace gown is finally done. I am absolutely in love with this dress. It's perfect for any special occasion. I hope you guys enjoyed this silk lace prom dress tutorial. If you guys do recreate this dress, don't forget to tag me on Instagram. I would love to see your final dresses. As a big thank you for all of your support, I'm giving you guys 15% off this sewing pattern, so I have linked the discount code down below for you guys. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really is the best way to support your favorite creators for free. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.